His father took him to the ocean for the first time when he was 5 years old. Not to surf, just to stand at the water's edge on a September morning in Encinitas, California. The Pacific spread wide and glittering in front of them. The waves small and friendly, crumbling onto the sand in long white lines. His father stood beside him and said nothing for a while. Just let the boy look. The boy's name was Luke. He looked at the ocean for a long time. He did not know yet what it was going to mean to him. He did not know yet that this morning, this particular light on this particular stretch of water, was the beginning of everything. He just looked. And then a wave came in, and the foam ran up the sand and covered his feet, and the cold of it made him gasp and grab his father's hand. And his father laughed. "It wants to meet you," his father said. His father's name was Roy. Roy Callahan was not a professional surfer. He was an electrician who surfed on weekends and early mornings before work. The kind of surfer who had never competed and never wanted to, who surfed because the ocean was 3 miles from his house, and because 20 minutes in the water in the morning made the rest of the day make sense. He had a longboard, a 9'6" single fin, pale yellow, dings repaired with mismatched resin, the nose slightly browned from years of wax and sun. Luke rode that board for the first time when he was 6. Roy took him out on a calm morning when the surf was knee-high, the water a flat, glassy blue-green in the early light before the onshore breeze came up. He held the tail of the board while Luke lay on his stomach and paddled. And then he turned the board toward shore and gave it a gentle push and said, "Get up." Luke got up. Not gracefully. His feet were in the wrong place, and his arms were windmilling, and he made it approximately 1 second before the board slid out from under him, and he went into the water. He came up laughing. "Again," he said. Roy smiled. They stayed out for 3 hours. By the time Luke was 9, he could surf. Not the way he would eventually surf, but he could paddle out, read the waves well enough to get into them, ride them to the shore. He had a used 5'7" shortboard his father had bought at a garage sale, and he rode it every Saturday and Sunday and every day of summer vacation. His father surfed beside him. They did not talk much in the water. That was one of the things Luke loved about it, the way the ocean made conversation unnecessary. You sat on your board in the lineup, and you watched the horizon, and you felt the water moving beneath you, and you waited. The waiting was not wasted time. The waiting was part of it. Roy had taught him this without saying it directly. By example, the way the best things are taught. By the time Luke was 12, he was better than his father. Roy knew it before Luke did. He drove him to his first contest, a local grommets division at Cardiff Reef. A gentle right-hander that peeled across a cobblestone bottom in long, workable lines. Luke came second. The following month, he came first. Roy watched from the beach, his arms folded, saying nothing. Afterward, in the car, he said, "You know what you're doing." Luke said, "I want to go to Hawaii." Roy drove. Hawaii came when Luke was 16. His father saved the money for a year. 2 weeks at a friend's house on the north shore of Oahu, November, when the swells from the North Pacific came in, and the waves that had been building for thousands of miles across open ocean finally hit the shallow reefs of the 7 Mile Miracle and stood up and broke. Luke had watched Pipeline on video since he was 8 years old. Nothing prepared him for the real thing. The first morning they drove to Ihukai Beach Park, parked in the dirt lot, and walked to the sand. It was early, 7 in the morning, and the swell was running at 6 to 8 Hawaiian, meaning wave faces of 12 to 16 feet. The sets coming in on the outside reef and lurching upward as the water moved from deep to shallow, the lips of the waves throwing out over the hollow barrel with a sound like a freight car hitting a wall. The water was an impossible blue, not the flat blue of postcard photos, a living blue, deep cobalt in the channel, going greenish white where the waves stood up on the reef, the lip catching the sun as it threw and refracting into a brief, cold, beautiful light before it crashed. Luke stood on the beach and said nothing. He paddled out on the second day. The channel was manageable, a rip current that ran alongside the break and allowed you to get out without paddling through the waves themselves. He sat in the lineup with 20 other surfers, most of them better than him, and waited. The first wave he caught was a smaller one, a 4-foot set wave on the inside section. He made the drop. He made the bottom turn. He felt the wave beginning to hollow behind him, and he stalled for a fraction of a second, not quite knowing what to do with the barrel forming over his shoulder. The wave closed out on him. He went over the falls, airborne for a moment, the white water hitting him like a wall, driving him down onto the reef. The coral was sharp, even through his wetsuit. He came up bleeding from the forearm. A long, shallow scrape. The kind of wound you don't feel until you're out of the water. He paddled back out. He did this for 9 days. By the time they flew home, he had made 3 barrels and wiped out on everything else. He knew, without having to think about it, that he was coming back. The years between 16 and 20 were the years of accumulation. He surfed everything he could reach from Encinitas, every point break and beach break and reef within driving distance. He competed on the junior circuit, winning often enough to be noticed and losing often enough to stay hungry. He got a small sponsorship from a regional surf shop, boards and wetsuits. Nothing more, but enough to make the math easier. He returned to the North Shore every winter. He got better at Pipeline, the way you get better at things that frighten you, which is slowly and through repetition and through learning to be calm in the situations that previously made you tense. Calm in the water was not the absence of fear. It was something built on top of fear, a layer of experience thick enough that the fear was still there, but could be managed, could be set aside for the moment of the drop, the bottom turn, the split-second decision about whether to pull into the barrel or straighten out. He learned to make that decision correctly more often than not. He was 20 when he made his first deep Pipeline barrel, a clean, proper, standing in the tube moment, the wave throwing over him, the light going green-blue inside the barrel, the sound changing from the open ocean roar to something lower and more intimate, the feeling of the board trimming across the face at exactly the right angle. He came out. The men in the channel whooped. He paddled back to the lineup and sat on his board and looked at the horizon and tried to stay composed and could not entirely manage it. He understood, sitting there, what had been pulling at him since he was 6 years old and the ocean had first run over his feet. It was this. Indonesia came when he was 22. A trip with 2 friends, 3 weeks, a borrowed truck, a series of islands and ferry rides and dirt roads that ended at beaches with no names on any map they carried. The Mentawai Islands, off the coast of Sumatra, are a chain of low, jungle-covered islands surrounded by reef systems that produce some of the most consistent and powerful waves in the world. The water is warm, 28 degrees Celsius, and so clear you can see the reef below from the surface. The coral heads brown and purple and white in 30 feet of blue. They surfed a left-hander called macaronis for 5 days straight. The wave was a dream, a long, perfectly peeling left that started on an outside reef and ran for 200 meters across a shallow inside section, the face steep enough to move fast but predictable enough to read. The water that warm green-blue of tropical shallows. The reef below visible on every bottom turn, close enough to remind you of consequence. Luke surfed 8 hours a day. He ate rice and fried fish from a warung on the beach and slept in a bamboo bungalow with a thatched roof and the sound of the ocean, a constant presence, in and out like breathing. He had never felt so completely in the right place. On the 4th day, a swell arrived. Macaronis doubled in size overnight, from a manageable 4 feet to a grinding 6 to 8, the wave now pushing into a different category, heavier, faster, less room for error on the inside section, where the reef was shallowest. He took off on a wave he should have let go. It was the 3rd wave of a large set, and he was in the wrong position. Too deep, too far back on the board. And when he dropped in, the wave was already past vertical, the face throwing out above him as he tried to get to his feet. He didn't make it. He went over with the lip. The whitewater hit him from above and drove him down. He felt the reef on his left shoulder. Not a cut, a compression. The weight of the ocean pressing him against coral for a moment before the turbulence swept him off and tumbled him. He held his breath. He knew not to panic. Panic burned oxygen, and oxygen was the resource you were managing when the ocean was holding you under. He had been trained for this, had practiced breath holding in swimming pools, had a number in his head. 15 seconds, 30, 45, and he counted. At 30, he felt the pressure ease. He swam for the surface. He came up in the white water, gasping, the sky an impossible blue above him, the next wave already on the horizon. He paddled hard for the channel. His shoulder ached. He paddled anyway. He sat in the channel for a while and looked at the wave and breathed and assessed. Shoulder was sore, but moving. No reef cuts. Board was fine. He paddled back to the lineup. The shoulder stayed sore for 2 weeks. He surfed through it, which was a mistake, and by the time he got home to California, it had become something that required an MRI and a conversation with a sports medicine doctor who told him he had partially torn his rotator cuff and needed to rest for 8 weeks. He rested for 5. Then he paddled out. The shoulder hurt for 6 months. He learned to surf around it, adjusting his paddle stroke, changing the way he popped to his feet, compensating in ways that became habit. Some of those compensations turned out to make him a better surfer. Forced efficiency. The injury removing a margin of sloppiness he had not known was there. This was not how he thought about it at the time. At the time, he was simply managing pain and trying not to fall further behind the other surfers his age, who were gaining ground on the qualifying tour, while he was icing his shoulder in a California apartment. He was behind. He did not like being behind. He trained harder. Teahupo'o. Every surfer who has ever been serious about the ocean knows the name. It sits on the southern coast of Tahiti in French Polynesia, at the end of a road that becomes a path that becomes a boat ride across a lagoon. The wave breaks on a reef called the Passes, where the ocean floor drops from very deep to very shallow in a very short distance. The swell arriving from the South Pacific, where it has travelled unimpeded for thousands of miles, and hitting this ledge and simply standing up. Not standing up the way normal waves stand up. Teahupo'o stands up like a wall. The face is nearly vertical from the first moment. The lip, 3 to 5 feet thick on a good swell, throws out in a slab. Not a curving arc like a normal barrel, but a horizontal projection of water that creates a chamber inside the wave large enough to park a small car in. The reef is 2 feet below the surface. 2 feet. On a large day, the water over the reef turns a translucent blue-green, almost teal, backlit by the Tahitian sun, and you can see the coral clearly from inside the barrel. Brown and grey and white, close enough to touch, close enough to end you. Luke went to Teahupo'o for the first time when he was 24. He did not surf it immediately. He spent 2 days watching from the channel in a boat, studying the wave, how the sets arrived, how they changed as the swell increased, where the takeoff spot was on different sized waves, how the barrel was different from pipeline, lower, wider, longer, the exit harder to find. On the 3rd day, he paddled out. The swell was running at 4 to 5 feet, moderate for Teahupo'o, still well beyond what most surfers in the world would consider manageable. He sat in the lineup and waited. The wave he took was a medium-sized set wave. The face, maybe 12 feet. The barrel visible from the moment he got to his feet. He made the drop. The acceleration on a wave that's steep was like nothing he had experienced. The board moving faster than his body expected. His feet adjusting automatically. Muscle memory doing the work his conscious mind was too busy to manage. He made the barrel. He stood in it for 4 seconds. He came out into the channel, the water exploding behind him, and the men on the boats and in the water shouted. He floated on his board. and looked at the sky. He did not shout. He breathed. He understood now why people called it the heaviest wave in the world, not because of the size, because of the consequence, because of how thin the margin was between the ride and the reef, between the moment of perfection and the moment of everything going wrong. He had been in that margin. He had come through it. For now. He came back to Teahupo'o the following year, on a swell that was bigger. 6 to 8, the morning he paddled out, the wave faces running 20 feet, the barrel wider and lower than before, the teal of the water over the reef catching the light in a way that was beautiful, and should not have been beautiful, given what was underneath it. He caught 3 waves in the morning session. The 4th wave caught him. He was in the right place, and he paddled and he stood, and the drop was fine, and the bottom turn was fine, and then the wave shifted. A small section stood up differently than expected, creating a step in the face that put him out of position for the barrel, and he tried to compensate, and could not. He went over the falls at Teahupo'o on a 20-foot wave. The impact was like being hit by a car. He was driven 12 feet underwater and held there by the turbulence of the breaking wave. The reef was immediately below him. He protected his head with his arms and felt the coral on his forearms and shins. Not a brush, but contact, sustained, the wave pressing him down while the turbulence rolled him. He counted. 15 seconds. 30. 40. At 45 seconds, the hold down released and he clawed for the surface, the leash pulling at his ankle, his lungs burning. He came up. The next wave was already coming. He had 4 seconds. He took a breath and dove deep, letting the wave pass over him, then surfaced again in the channel, gasping, his forearms bleeding from the reef, a gash on his left shin that would need stitches. The jet ski picked him up. He sat on the sled and let the driver take him to the boat. And he sat in the boat and looked at the wave and breathed. One of the other surfers on the boat, an Australian named Dean, who had been surfing Teahupo'o for 10 years, looked at him and said, "You good?" Luke thought about it for a moment. "Yeah," he said. "Good fall," Dean said. "Covered your head." "My dad taught me that," Luke said. "Smart man." "He's an electrician," Luke said. Dean laughed. The stitches were 11. He was back in the water in 6 days. Jeffreys Bay, South Africa. July. The southern hemisphere winter, when the swells are largest. The roaring 40s pushing long-period groundswell up from the Antarctic. And the point at Jeffreys Bay, J-Bay to anyone who surfs, receives these swells and does something remarkable with them. It turns them into the longest right-hander in the world. The wave starts on the outside point, a section called boneyards, and peels through into supertubes, where it hollows and throws and creates the barrel it is famous for, and then continues through the tube section and the point and beyond. A single ride sometimes lasting more than a minute, the surfer moving faster and faster as the wave accelerates through each section. The water is cold in July. 14 degrees Celsius. A thick wetsuit. Booties. The Indian Ocean here is a deep, dark blue, not the tropical teal of Tahiti or the warmer blue of Hawaii, but something more serious, more northern-looking, a colour that knows about the open ocean to the south and the ice beyond. Luke arrived at J-Bay in the final year of his run on the qualifying series. He needed a good result. The qualifying tour was the year he spent not surfing the World Tour, but trying to earn a place on it. 24 spots for the best surfers in the world. A season of competition across multiple countries. The rankings accumulating through the year. The cut-off approaching in December. He was ranked 31st. He needed to be 24th. He needed J-Bay. The contest ran over 10 days. The organisers waiting for the best swell. On day 4, it arrived. A solid 6 to 8 feet of groundswell. The wave at its absolute best. The faces long and clean and fast. The barrel at super tubes, throwing hard and holding its shape. Luke surfed the best heat of his life in the quarterfinals. He caught 4 waves. 3 of them he made the barrel. The 4th was a long connected ride all the way through from super tubes to the tubes section, covering perhaps 300 meters. His back foot driving the board through each critical section, his front hand trailing in the face of the wave. He scored a 9.4, the highest score of the event to that point. He went to the beach and sat in the sand and put his head in his hands and allowed himself to feel it. The accumulated weight of 10 years of early mornings and long drives and distant countries and stitches and ice packs, and the particular loneliness of being far from home and injured and behind. He felt all of it. Then he stood up and went to watch the next heat. He made the final. The final was held on the last day of the waiting period, the swell having dropped slightly to a more consistent 4 to 6. Still good. The wave still Jeffreys Bay in all its perfection. He surfed against a Brazilian named Marco, who was older than him and had been on the world tour twice before, and who surfed with a precision that Luke respected and had studied carefully. The final was 40 minutes. For the first 20 minutes, Marco led. His surfing was technically excellent, tighter in the barrel, more consistent on his scoring waves. Luke was surfing well, but not at the level of the quarterfinal. He sat in the lineup between waves and looked at the horizon. He thought about his father, about the pale yellow longboard, about the cold white foam running over his feet when he was 5 years old. He was not anxious. He was in the ocean. He had been in the ocean his whole life. He knew what to do here. A set appeared on the horizon. He paddled for priority position. He took the first wave of the set. A large, clean 6-foot face, the barrel already forming at the top of his takeoff. He was in perfect position. He dropped late, the latest he could drop and still make it. The kind of takeoff that requires absolute commitment. And he made it, driving hard off the bottom and stalling into the barrel and holding his line for what felt like a long time in the green dark of the tube. He came out. The judges scored it a 9.8. He needed only a small score on his other wave to take the lead on combined heat total. He caught it with 4 minutes remaining. He won the final by 2/10 of a point. He did not know, sitting in the competition area with his board leaning against the scaffolding and a towel around his shoulders, that he had qualified for the world tour. He would not know until the end of the season, when the final rankings came through. But he knew he had surfed well. He knew he had given himself a chance. He called his father from the parking lot of the contest site, standing in the cold South African evening with the ocean visible behind the dunes and the last light going out of the sky. The phone rang 3 times. "Dad." "How'd you go?" "I won." A pause. Won the heat. Won the contest. A longer pause. The whole thing. The whole thing. He heard his father exhale. "Well," Roy said, "just that." Well, it was enough. The ranking came through in December. He was 22nd. 2 spots inside the qualification line. He read the number 3 times before it registered. 22nd in the world. He had a professional surfing card. He sat at the kitchen table in the house in Encinitas, where he had grown up. He had moved back for the last part of the qualifying season to save money, and looked at the screen and thought about how to feel about it. What he felt was tired, deeply tired, in the way you feel after something that has required everything of you over a long period of time. He was 26 years old. He had been working toward this for 20 years. It did not feel like triumph exactly. It felt like the quiet at the end of a long paddle, the moment when you stop moving and the water goes still around you, and you are simply where you are, resting in it, breathing. He had earned a place in the ocean's best company. That was the thing. He had earned it. His father came over that evening. They sat on the back porch with 2 beers, the way they had sat many times over many years. The sound of the neighborhood around them, and the faint, ever-present smell of the ocean 3 miles away. Roy did not make a speech. He was not a speech-making man. He sat with his beer and looked at the sky, the way he looked at the horizon when they were in the water, not searching for anything, just looking, comfortable with what was there. After a while, he said, "Do you remember the first time you paddled out?" "Cardiff," Luke said. "I was 8. You didn't catch a wave. You just sat out there for an hour." "I know. I thought you'd be frustrated. Come back in. Give up." "I wasn't frustrated," Luke said. "I know. That's when I knew." Luke looked at him. "Knew what?" "That you'd figured out what the ocean actually is," Roy said. "Most kids that age want the wave. They want the ride. You were happy just to be out there, just to sit in it." Luke thought about this. "I still feel that way," he said. "I know," his father said. "That's why you're going to the world tour." They sat. The night was warm. Somewhere in the dark, beyond the houses and the road and the dunes and the sand, the Pacific moved in the way it always moved. Patient and enormous, reaching the shore and pulling back and reaching again. the way it had been doing since long before either of them was born. Luke finished his beer. He thought about Teahupo'o, about the barrel on the teal water over the reef, about the hold down and the counting and the breath at the surface. He thought about his forearms on the coral and the stitches and Dean's voice. Good fall covered your head. He thought about J-Bay in the cold July morning, the dark Indian Ocean running fast and clean through super tubes, the barrel holding its shape for the length of the ride. He thought about the pale yellow longboard and the foam running over his feet and his father's hand. It wants to meet you. The ocean was out there. It was always out there. He would be in it tomorrow morning, as he had been in it nearly every morning of his life. Not competing, not training, just sitting. Just the board beneath him and the water around him and the horizon ahead, wide and open, the swells coming in from whatever distant corner of the Pacific had made them. The same ocean, the same patience it had always had. He would be out there at first light, in the dark before the sun came up, paddling through the shore break and out past the inside section and into the lineup, sitting up on the board, looking at the water, looking at the sky, waiting. Not in the way you wait for something to happen, in the way his father had taught him, without words, by example, all those years ago, in the way the ocean itself waits, as if waiting was not the time before the thing, as if waiting was the thing. He slept soundly that night. He always slept soundly the nights before he surfed. The ocean was 3 miles away, and he could not hear it from the house. But he knew it was there, the way you know the things that have been with you your whole life. Present, patient, his.